Welcome to this episode of my podcast. My name is Kalsoom, and I specialize in training medical professionals how to get the score they need in IELTS or OET so that they can get their dream job, take their career to the next level, and start living their best life with their families by providing them with bigger and better opportunities. Before I start with the main topic for this week's episode, I just want to make you aware of how you can use this podcast to your maximum advantage. This is no ordinary podcast. You can use this podcast by one, simply listening to the podcast to get some advice that will help you in your IELTS or OET preparation. Number two, actively listening to this podcast to improve your listening skills. I try to keep it short. I know you guys are very busy people, but you can use it for focused listening practice. So you can use the show notes, which is a complete transcript of each episode. You can read the episode as you listen and analyze the language, learn new words or phrases, practice pronunciation and intonation. Number three, also included in the show notes are some comprehension style questions that you can use by reading the transcript, using your skimming and scanning techniques to answer the questions. Answers are provided at the end, but you can also check your answers by listening to the podcast. Number four, you can use it as a listening test and answer the same questions while listening. And number five, I also include a brief analysis of some useful words or phrases that I have used in the podcast, which you can learn. So it's up to you how you would like to use this tool. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your colleagues and social media so that more people can benefit from it too. Hi, and welcome to this episode. In this episode, we will be talking about the most common mistakes that I've seen recently with my students to do with speaking. And you really need to ask yourself, are you making these mistakes as well? But before we get into that, just a few quick reminders about the links that I have in the show notes that will benefit you. First of all, I've started doing weekly Q&As in my free OET Facebook group. If you would like to join the Facebook group, the free Facebook group, the link is in the show notes. These weekly Q&As are on Fridays, Friday mornings, UK time, around 11:30. And you can just come along and ask your questions about OET. I'm there for an hour. It's on a Zoom call. And I just give you the advice, basically. You just ask me any questions that you have, and I just help you out, give you some guidance, give you some kind of advice, tips, and things like that to help you keep moving forward in your preparation. So the link to join is in the show notes. Also in the show notes, if you would like to join my OET Success membership training, that's my main training, where you have access to my OET course and you have daily lessons and things like that. The link to join is in the show notes, sorry. Also is a little video. There's a little video there that shows you inside the membership. And I show you exactly how the training works, the live lessons, the OET course, and how the feedback works, and all of that good stuff. So if you're curious to see how the training works, then just watch that video. Also in the show notes is a link to my free training, Preparing for OET Success. And in that, I show you exactly what you should be doing every day to prepare for OET. So how to improve your reading skills, your listening skills, your writing skills, your speaking skills, your grammar, your vocabulary, pronunciation, all of that stuff. So go take a look at that and you can download that for free. Okay, on to this episode. So are you making these speaking mistakes? Are you speaking too formally? Do you speak like you write? Are you sounding unnatural and not how native English speakers speak? Now, these three things are things that I see again and again and again with most students. And I think the root cause of this is that students don't actually understand the marking criteria and what is required of them. The problem with the speaking test, and again, this goes for IELTS and OET, so this episode is relevant for both tests. There are lots of model answers for writing for you to make comparisons with. So there's lots of, model letters, model answers that you can look at and analyze. And with the reading and the listening, you can check your answers. If the answers are right or wrong. But what about speaking? There are a few model kind of mock exams that you can find on YouTube for OET on their OET website. But there are very few that demonstrate the test and, and the student's response, but not that much. There's not as much as there is for writing, for example. So what ends up happening is students fall into the habit of speaking as they write. So their thought process of how they want to say something is in the form of how they write. Yeah. Now, why is this a problem? Well, this is a problem because the way we write is very different to the way we speak. The way we speak is very different to the way we write. We don't speak in full grammatical sentences, and the language we use in academic essays or medical letters will not be the same language we use when we speak. So you must separate this in your mind and adopt a more natural style of speaking. I'm not saying that you have to speak very informally. There is a balance that has to be made there. And you still have to sound professional, but not so formal as if you're writing an essay. So let's break this down between the two tests. Let's look at the two tests, and I'll give you some examples of what I mean. So let's look at IELTS first. So unlike the OET, you're not in a role play situation. You don't have a scenario where you have to speak as a medical professional. You're given a cue card and a scenario, and the examiner takes on the role of the patient, and you are the medical professional, and you have to act out a dialogue. Basically, the IELTS is very different. You are you are talking as yourself, giving your own opinions and discussing different topics. So it's very much like having a conversation with a friend or a colleague. So you would have to talk with that in mind, keeping your language simple. Yeah, and this is something students really struggle with. They don't understand that the IELTS speaking test, the approach that you must take is that you are speaking to a colleague or a friend. So you need to think about the way you would speak to a colleague, for example. You wouldn't speak so academically, would you? So let's take an example. If the examiner asked you, what did you do last weekend? Say that's a very typical question, typical IELTS question, part 1 IELTS question. What did you do on the weekend? You wouldn't respond by saying something like this. I commenced my weekend by waking up early and I attended the gym. I next had lunch with a friend and then finished my day by watching a movie at the nearby cinema. It sounds perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong grammatically or if I went through the marking criteria, it'd be absolutely fine. But it sounds really formal, as if you are writing. Yeah. You wouldn't talk like that to a friend or a colleague in this way. So why would you in the IELTS test? Yeah. You would say something more like, last weekend, I woke up really early and decided to go to the gym. After that, I met up with one of my friends and we had lunch together. And in the evening, we went to the cinema to watch a movie. Yeah, it sounds much more natural, simple language, no formality, but not completely informal. Just how a native speaker would speak to a colleague, not complicated. And there's no need to overthink the language, the vocabulary, the structure. Just keep it simple. So let's look at OET. So let's say the scenario. So for those of you not familiar with OET, if you're doing IELTS, you are given a scenario. The examiner takes on the role of the patient, and the person taking the test is the medical professional, and you are given a whole scenario that you have to deal with. It's like a consultation with a nurse or a doctor. So let's say the scenario is the nurse, as a nurse, you need to explain to your patient the importance of doing regular exercise. Okay, you wouldn't speak to your patient like this. It is therefore vital that you partake in regular exercise, regular physical activity, as this will result in a loss of weight and a reduction in cholesterol. Now, there's nothing wrong in what I've said grammatically or anything like that. It's fine, but it's not the way you would actually speak to a patient. You would say something like, it's really important that you exercise regularly because this will help you to lose weight and control your cholesterol levels. Yeah. It's not so grammatical. Yeah. We don't speak in grammatical sentences. So, you really need to ask yourself, are you making these mistakes? Are you speaking in this formal way? Again, it's professional language, but simple. Notice the things like contractions I used in both responses for IELTS and for the OET responses. I used it's, I've, I use contractions, and that's okay. You wouldn't do that in your writing, in an academic essay or in the OET letter, but you can in the speaking. So that's the difference you need to keep in your mind. In both these examples, for IELTS and for OET, the language used is uncomplicated. There are no complex grammar structures, no complicated vocabulary, just normal everyday language, just like a native English speaker would speak. This is the change you need to make when you're practicing for speaking. And you will find how much easier it will be for you to speak because you're not thinking too much about the formal language. You're freeing up more brain space to think about more simple language that will come more naturally to you. When you're thinking grammatically, you have to think about the structure first in your head and then speak. And, doing that affects your fluency. When you're pausing, obviously, to think about, how you're going to say this in a grammatical way or use really kind of academic words, that takes up too much time. And when you're hesitating because you're thinking of all of these things, your fluency mark will go down. So, there is a difference between the way we speak and the way we write. And it's the same as if, the way I speak, and if I'm reading something out, there is a difference. You can tell a difference if I'm speaking naturally or if I'm reading something. There is a difference. It works in exactly the same way. As always, this takes some practice, as you're probably breaking old habits and learning new ones. This is probably something that you've been doing for a while and you've not realized that this is a mistake. So in order to break that habit, it takes time. So be patient with yourself as always. But try to think of the way you speak to a patient in your own native language. How, for OET, if you are speaking to a patient, how do you speak to them? Especially when you're being sympathetic, reassuring, all those kinds of things, you wouldn't speak so formally. And, in the same way for IELTS, how would you speak to a colleague or a friend? Think of it that way in your own native language and try to adopt the same style. Yeah, it's no different in English. Also, try to think of the way you would like to be spoken to by a friend or a colleague or a doctor or a nurse. How would you like to be spoken to? How are you spoken to? And think of it that way. So changing how you approach the speaking test will help you make the change that you need. And this is, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is something I see a lot. And it's really hard to break these habits. But, it's something that takes time and you need to work on it. So be patient with yourself. So as always, if you need any help, you can always email me. My email is always in the show notes, or you can come along to the Q&As. Yeah, let me know. Let me know if you find this a problem, and if you need more help in thinking about how to change the way that you speak. Until the next episode, take care and keep up with the good work.
I really hope you have found this episode useful. Please let me know if you have. I would love to get your feedback, and if there is something you would like me to do an episode on for IELTS or for OET, please just let me know. The details on how you can contact me are in the show notes of this episode. And remember, nothing changes if nothing changes. If you are not willing to change or implement advice and you keep doing the same thing, you will keep getting the same results again and again. Real progress, real improvement comes when you push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your colleagues and on your social media so that more people can benefit too. Take care and keep working hard.